So I want to begin in January the 31st, 1918. And the heading speaks about diffusing oneself in Jesus, to be able to say that what belongs to Jesus is mine. Now, dissolving oneself in Jesus is fusing.
What date, sorry?
January the 31st, 1918. So Luisa said, I was abandoning all of myself in Jesus, and he said to me, my daughter, number one, dissolve yourself in me. That's, I fuse all of me in all of you all the time. Number two, you must dissolve your prayer in mine. In other words, it's not just my prayer, it's now his prayer. That's number two. So if you dissolve your prayer in mine, your prayer and mine will be one single prayer. And that it may not be recognized as yours. It may not be recognized which one is yours and which one is mine. That's like if we put two amounts of water in this glass. How do you know which one is which? Because they're completely fused together. They're mixed completely together. So if our prayer is dissolved in Jesus' prayer, nobody will know which bit is yours and which bit is his. Now, number three, you must dissolve your pains in mine. Number four, you must dissolve your works in mine. Number five, you must dissolve your will in mine. And number six, you must dissolve your love in mine. So you must dissolve them all in my pains, my works, my will, my love, and all the rest of it. So every single thing we're dissolving in him. If it's suffering, we're dissolving in his suffering. If it's work, we're dissolving in his work. If it is love, we're dissolving in his love, and all the rest of it. That means you can put Galatians 2:20 beside that. I no longer live, Christ lives in me. So we form one single thing, so much that you may be able to say what belongs to Jesus is mine, and I will be able to say, Jesus said, what is yours is mine. Now that's straight out of the Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 16. My beloved is mine, and I am his. That's Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 16. My beloved is mine, and I am his. So, then Jesus gives us an image. Imagine a glass of water which is poured into a large container of water. Would you be able to distinguish afterwards the water from the glass and the water from the container? Of course not. Therefore, to your greatest gain and my highest contentment, repeat to me often, in whatever you do, Jesus, I pour it into you, that I may not do my will but yours. Now there you have the motto of the Divine Will mission, and that is, not my will but thine be done, O Lord. Not my will but thine be done. And it'll sound pious until somebody crosses your will, and then you know that it's not pious any longer, it's sacrifice. Okay, not my will, but yours be done. So there you have, in one paragraph, exactly what to do all day, every day. It's wonderful. So, I don't know if you give yourself headings, I do. What to do daily is what I write over that. Okay. So, February the 2nd, 1918, the heading is that churches will be deserted without ministers. And you have to remember what was going on in the Soviet Union, the Bolshevik Revolution, and atheistic materialism taking over, destroying the Orthodox Church, and millions of martyrs that came out of it. So continue in my usual state, my beloved Jesus made himself seen, so very afflicted. And Luisa said, my love, what's wrong that you're so afflicted? And he said, my daughter, When I allow that churches remain deserted, ministers dispersed, masses reduced, it means that the sacrifices are offences to me. This is scary beyond scary. I don't know about you. It is that the sacrifices are offences to me. The prayers are insults. The adorations are irreverence. In other words, it's all on the outside. The confessions are amusements and without fruit. I want to give you 3 words for that. Abuse of the liturgy. Therefore, no longer finding my glory, but rather offences, nor any good for them, since they are of no use to me anymore, I remove them. That's like us throwing out something that's useless. However, this snatching ministers away from my sanctuary means that things have reached the ugliest point. In other words, it's the last straw for him. And that the variety of scourges will multiply. How hard man is, how hard. I want to give you Jeremiah 17, verses 9 to 10, where Jeremiah says that the heart of man is perverse. Jeremiah 17, verses 9 to 10. The heart is perverse. And I don't think you have to go to Soviet Russia to find out that the heart is perverse. I don't know if you ever found it looking in a mirror. Because we belong to a fallen human race. And until we're completely satisfied, this problem of the heart in rebellion against God is there for everybody. And it's the great battle that we have to fight to give God the glory of a life surrendered to him. So February the 17th, 1918, the heat of the divine will destroys imperfections. Now notice heat, because the Lord uses the image of the sun as the image of divine will. And you know that if you go to a tropical country and lie under the sun, you're asking for trouble. You'll be burnt up. I was feeling a little distracted, Luisa said, and pouring myself into the will of God, and I was asking forgiveness for my distraction. Would that occur to you, to ask forgiveness for your distraction? And he said, my daughter, the sun with its heat destroys the miasma, the infectious part of manure, when it is spread on the soil to fertilize the plants. I think that's very interesting. So to answer Louisa's situation, he gives her an example of what happens on farms, where you use the manure of animals to actually fertilize plants. But Jesus says that manure requires the heat of the sun to burn away anything that is not useful for the plant. Now, he said, the heat of my will, as soon as the soul enters into it, destroys the infection. We need infections destroyed, don't we? It destroys the defects which the soul has contracted in her distraction. That's very interesting, because if you turn away from God, you're either turning to self or the world, one or the other. Therefore, as soon as you feel the distraction, do not remain within yourself, but enter immediately into my will, so that my heat may purify you and prevent it from making you wither. Now, a little point on Christian doctrine, and that is that the Church has taught us all down the centuries that in receiving Holy Communion with proper dispositions and in grace, that when Jesus comes into us, he actually heals us of our defects and imperfections as well. So even more so if we are open to let the divine will actually operate within us. And so Jesus says, open up completely to the sun of the divine will, and that heat will purify us. So this means that we are constantly in need of purification. Even if you get a deep clean done on your house, the funny thing is you might have to dust it a week later. And then maybe another week and you have to clean the windows and you say, no, hang on, I had a deep clean done in this place. Yeah, but it's exposed to the air and everything that's going on. And so you find every now and then that Jesus does a dusting on Luisa. And she often says to him, what are you doing in there, inside in her heart? And he says, well, I'm cleaning up. I'm tidying up, I'm cleaning up. So the purification has to be continuous. So please don't be surprised if the Lord decides to do a deep clean on you sometime. It's not a problem, it's actually a grace. So March the 4th, the firmness, constancy and fortitude that is required of us to really surrender fully 100% to the divine will and to stay there and to live in it, that produces heroism. So Jesus said to Luisa, my daughter, have courage, do not move in anything. Firmness, that's constancy, a firm, unchanging, permanent, immovable position of surrender to God. This is the greatest virtue. Firmness produces heroism, and it's almost impossible that one not become a great saint. Now, he's not interested in saints. He can get saints from the middle level. He's interested in great saints from the higher level. Even more, as the soul keeps repeating her acts, she forms two bars, one to the right and one to the left, which serve her as both support and defence. Now, if you go to Psalm 23, we're told in Psalm 23 that the Lord is our shepherd and he protects us with his rod and his staff. The staff is the guidance and the rod is the defence. So we need support and defence. As she reiterates her acts, a fount forms within her. So the more acts we do, the more a fount of life is developed within us. It is of new and increasing love. Firmness strengthens grace and places on it the seal of final perseverance. Now, final perseverance is one of the greatest of the graces of God. That you actually die in grace. Your Jesus does not fear that his graces may remain without effects, and therefore I pour them in torrents over the constant soul. So the person who is permanently open to the Lord, then the flood tide of God's grace can flow in. From a soul who today operates and tomorrow does not, who now does one good and then another, there's not much to expect. And that's what we call fair weather Christians. Have you heard of that term before? Yeah, fair weather. In my experience of giving retreats over a period of 40 years, I've had many people come to me, and the summary of the big story they would tell you is, I used to really enjoy my prayer. I got a lot out of it. I got words from God. I got insights into Scripture and blah, blah, blah. I'm getting nothing now, so it's all over. It was all a bubble. I said, now you're beginning to start. Because the heat of your emotions has died down. Now the reality of your commitment kicks in. And for some of them who weren't able to take it on that level, I said to them, it's the morning after you've returned home from the honeymoon. You've got to get on with life. You've got to pick up your job. You've got to get on with your duties. The relationship hasn't changed, but this has kicked in. It's a reality stage, and it begins to show up whether there is real commitment there or not. Now, the Lord allows all of us to go through periods of dryness. That means that you couldn't think a holy thought if somebody put it into your head. And holy prayers on your lips just don't feel right, because you've dried up inside. Now, in that position, to continue doing your normal adoration and praise to the Lord and your rounds and your reading and everything that you do normally, to continue doing it, that's when virtue shows up. Not when you feel good. Not when you feel in the humour. And so The person who's at a much earlier stage, when they feel good about it, then they'll do all this adoration and praise and everything. And when they don't feel good, then they're off duty. He says you can't expect much. I want to give you Revelation 3:15 for that. So the person who's on today and off tomorrow will not have any support and will be bounced from one point to another. She'll die of spiritual hunger. My book says hunger, but he's talking about spiritual hunger. Because she will not have the fount of firmness or constancy or fortitude which makes love arise. Grace fears to pour itself. Now, in that context, the word grace means God. God fears to pour his grace into us because grace is an outpouring of God, because she will abuse it and she will use it to offend me. That's 1 Corinthians 11:30. So notice that if the Lord holds back, it's because we're not doing something right. If he pours his graces in abundance upon us, it means that we are doing something right and we're open to him and we're allowing him to work within us. So March the 16th, 1918, the nourishment of Jesus. Luisa said, I felt a great need and I turned my sorrowful laments to the Lord. And he, all goodness, came out from within my interior. That's Luke 17:21. The kingdom of God is within you. And it's also 1 Corinthians 3:16. Know you not that you are the temple of the living God, and the Spirit of God dwells there. So he came out from my interior, clothed in a garment studded with the most refulgent diamonds, and as though waking up from a great sleep, and all tenderness he told me, my daughter, what do you want? That's not bad, is it? Your laments, now usually the translation says wounded, and they mean touched. Your laments really touched my heart, and I woke up to answer your needs immediately. You must know that I was inside of your heart, and as you were doing your acts, your prayers, your reparations, and you were pouring yourself into my will and were loving me, I took everything for myself, and I used it to nourish myself and to embellish my garment with precious diamonds. Now, this garment of precious diamonds is put on the soul when they enter heaven. Is that any help? This is so true, that as you were loving me, praying me, and so on, I did not remain on an empty stomach, as if you were doing nothing. I was the one who took everything, since you gave me full freedom. That's your full surrender. Now, when the soul does this, I cannot rest when she is in need. I make myself all for her. You see, my beloved is mine, and I am his. He said in the last message, you pour yourself into me, I pour myself into you. And Luisa said, I told him my extreme needs, shedding bitter tears to the point of wetting his most holy hands. And sweet Jesus clasped me to his heart, pouring a most sweet water from his heart into mine, which refreshed all of me. Now, of course, water is the symbol of grace. And he said, my daughter, do not fear. I will be all for you. Now, you couldn't actually get a promise greater than that, could you? That God will be all for you. If creatures will be missing, I will do everything. I will bind you and I will release you. Remember the binding and releasing that was handed over to the church? So Jesus said, if creatures let you down, I'll do it, don't worry. Because he's the great high priest. I will never leave you without me. That's Joshua 1:5. I will never leave you or desert you. Now there are many more references to that, but one is enough. I will never leave you without me. You are too dear to me. I have raised you in my will. You are part of myself. I will guard you, and I will say to everyone, nobody touch her. Now, this nobody touch her is very, very important. It means that Luisa has become the apple of his eye. You've heard that expression before, haven't you? Okay. Psalm 17:8. Lamentations 2:18. And Zechariah 2:8. Now, in the time of the Old Testament, the chosen people were the apple of God's eye. And in Zechariah 2:8, the prophet says, the other nations will learn what it is to touch the apple of his eye. It's very interesting. And even though throughout the Old Testament period, the Lord would allow other nations to move in and conquer them, that was to purify them. But the other nations had to pay a price for doing it. You touch the apple of his eye. And on the same level, there's a warning in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, touch not my anointed. And to my prophets do no harm. You don't touch anyone that's close to me. And that is the jealousy of the Lord for the one who truly loves him and is prepared to give their lives to him. Now, there's a lot in the Bible about the jealousy of the Lord, but I won't give you the references here. I've given you the reference just for the apple of his eye first. So, March the 19th, 1918, Jesus feels nausea over the disunion of priests. So he said to Luisa, my daughter, what nausea I feel over the disunion of priests, it's intolerable for me. Their disordered lives, now you know that the business we're into is reordering our lives and letting God's order come into our lives. See, a disordered life cannot actually take the Holy Spirit. It cannot take grace. Grace would be leaking from all kinds of holes. So a disordered life is something God can't work with. So he chastises it. Their disordered lives are the cause for my justice to permit my enemies. Now I want you to notice that my enemies, to be over them and to ill-treat them. Now, if you go back just a few messages, I told you about the Bolshevik Revolution, didn't I? And the communists and the Marxists overturning the church in the Russia first of all, and then in all the satellite states. So my enemies were allowed to destroy my church. The reason for that you're being told. And if the enemy is allowed to do that, then the enemy has to take responsibility for what they do. But the Lord is trying to purify his church. And it's a very interesting thing that in 1989, when the communist wall came down, the very first thing the people did was put the crosses back on the churches. Didn't matter what condition the churches were. They put the cross back up. In other words, they said, Lord, we're reinstating you. And I had the experience of attending Mass in the great cathedral of St. Catherine, I think they call it, in St. Petersburg, which had been abominably abused by the communists, and the church put up a tent inside of it to have Mass. And we said, Lord, you began in a tent, you don't mind. But it was very interesting because the devastation was all around us, the abuse that they had done. Because they seemed to need to destroy all iconography and all statues and all images, anything to do with God. They wanted to wipe the name of God off the face of the earth. So, and Jesus puts the blame down to the priests. Now, if you know your Old Testament, you'll understand this. Because if you read the prophets in the Old Testament, whenever there was a problem among the people of God, the prophets always said that the people to blame were the leaders of religion and the political leaders. And they were completely clear about it. In other words, the shepherds should be doing their job of taking care of the sheep. The sheep are not supposed to be looking after the shepherds. So their disordered lives are the cause for my justice to permit my enemies to be over them to ill-treat them. The evil ones are already about to come out against them, And Italy is about to commit the greatest sin, that is, of persecuting my church and of dirtying her hands with innocent blood. Now, Italy was quick to pick up the communist thing and so on. You need to go into history for that, okay? Now, why would it be the greatest sin for Italy? Because Jesus had put the heart of his church into Rome. And it was from Italy that the church was to go out to the ends of the earth. In other words, it was from Italy that divine love was to reach everybody. And so, as far as he's concerned, this is a complete abomination. So while he was saying this, he showed our allied nations devastated, many places disappeared, and their pride knocked down. Now, their pride knocked down is Isaiah chapter 2, and I think it's verse 7, 9, 11, and I think 17. And each of those verses says the same thing. The pride of man must be brought low. The pride of man must be brought low. Because pride is the great sin. Pride is the sin that sets us against God. Okay. And I presume you know you're going to get absolutely nowhere in divine will if there's pride there. That's why the Lord tells us to get into our nothingness, which is way below humility. If I can say I'm humble, there's still a bit of me there. But if I'm in my nothingness, there's nothing of me there. And if there's nothing of me there, there's no room for pride. So you're safe. Okay. So in the early volumes, the first 4 volumes, the Lord tries to make us safe so we can take this journey. And you're only safe in your nothingness. So March the 26th, 1918, the one who operates in the divine will, as one who operates in the divine will, what is human remains suspended and the divine life takes over. So you're either going to live this human life or the divine life. One or the other, that's your choice. If you're choosing the divine life, the human has got to go. So he's going to give you the reason why you have to do many acts as well. Because I remember that was one of the questions that I used to be asked in class. You know, how often do you have to repeat this, you know? And the only answer I was able to give at the time was that if you were going to knit this jumper, 1 stitch wouldn't get you very far. You needed an awful lot of stitches to actually get the jumper. Okay, and if you look at any garment you're wearing, it takes many, many, many stitches to make the garment. Okay, so watch this now, he's going to tell us. Luisa said she was continuing in her usual state and she was trying to fuse herself. Now I ring the little word trying because we're not always in a good space. Either you're not feeling well or you're overtired or you're dry or whatever it is, but you make an effort. So Jesus said, my daughter, every time the soul enters into my volition, every time she prays, every time she works and suffers, etc., she acquires as many new divine beauties. So if you want that divine garment with all the heavenly beauties on it, you better do enough acts to actually make the garment. So one more act or less done in my will is one more beauty or less that the soul acquires. Now, if we as a community of divine will enter heaven today, okay, and in other words, we've passed off the earth and we've arrived, okay, and the Lord looks at us and some of the diamonds are missing from your thing, or some of the colours are missing from your garment, he'll say, now where have you been? We're supposed to have all the colours and all the diamonds. Is that okay? That's why you do many acts in the divine will. Many. And that's the whole business of multiplying the acts to infinity. Okay. So one more act or one less done in my will is one more beauty or one less that the soul requires. Not only this, but in each additional act that she does in my will, she takes on one more divine strength, one more bit of wisdom, one more bit of love, one more bit of sanctity, and the rest. Now do you see it? that every single act is adding to this, just like every stitch is adding to this jumper, and it's making the final product. So we're actually making a product with him and in him. So while she takes on the divine qualities, she has to leave the human ones. So I can't be operating at a lower level and a higher level at the same time. It's either one or the other. Even more, as she operates in my will, what is human remains as though suspended, because you're not dead. And the divine life acts and takes its place, and my love has the freedom to undertake its attitude in the creature. It's able to take its position, it's able to take its throne. And the more acts we do, the more the Lord is enthroned in our lives. And of course, when all of us as a community do this, we then are putting more and more stitches into the red carpet for the Lord's return. Quoting Greg. Okay, I love that image of the red carpet. So if we want the carpet to be long and luscious, then the whole community has got to be knitting very strongly. So March the 27th, 1918. By living in the divine will, the soul finds everything in a divine and infinite way. So this is very, very important. As we try to live completely fused in the divine will, our lives become more divine than human. Is that okay? She finds everything in a divine and infinite way. So Jesus said to Luisa, "My daughter, am I not the one who forms..." Oh, sorry, let me go back. "I was lamenting to Jesus, for I couldn't listen to Holy Mass," she said. So he said, "My daughter, am I not the one who forms the sacrifice, because Jesus is the high priest?" Will you write high priest down? "And all other priests are in persona Christi." In other words, they're standing in his shoes for a particular congregation. So am I not the one who forms the sacrifice? And it is his sacrifice, because it is Calvary. "Now, since I am present in each sacrifice, the soul who lives in me and in my will remains as though sacrificed together with me." Now, if my will remains consciously surrendered to him, I am living sacrificed to him. But if I'm doing my own will, I'm not sacrificed to anything, am I? So, since I am present in each sacrifice, the soul who lives with me and in my will remains as though sacrificed together with me, not in one Mass, but in all the Masses. And since she lives in my will, she remains consecrated with me in all the hosts. I don't know if you can get that one, can you? If you're consecrated with him in all the hosts, then everybody else is receiving you as well as him. You're in the host, aren't you? Okay. Isn't it unbelievable? Yeah. So, never go out of my will, he said, and I will let you reach wherever you want. Well, if I am conscious of the fact that the Lord can consecrate me and put me into all the hosts that other people are receiving, then I'm going to, what do I want to reach? I want to reach their hearts. I want to reach their souls. I want to reach their minds. I want to put the shafts of divine light into their intellects, their memories, their wills. I want to put the flames of divine love into their hearts, so that when they receive, they're getting all this from me as well as from him. It's the two of us, he and I, together. So she remains consecrated with me in all the hosts. So never go out of my will, and I will let you reach wherever you want. Even more, between you and me there will be such electricity of communication that you will not do one act without me, and I not one act without you. That is the incredible bit. I don't have so much difficulty with me entering into him, but with him not doing anything without me, I find that absolutely beyond amazing. Do you? Yeah. But now you see why he comes to Luisa and he tells her what he's doing, and he allows her to dialogue with him and to put what she thinks as well. And if she wants to stop him from doing the chastisement, she's allowed to participate. She's allowed to be part of the decision making. So, when you lack something, enter into my will, and you will find there, ready, prepared for you, whatever you want. You are going to take that off the page, aren't you? And put it onto something where you can see it clearly. If you lack something, you enter into the divine will. It's there, it's ready for you, it's already prepared. As many masses as you want, as many communions, as much love as you want. Nothing is missing in my will. So, let me give you an example that might be a little bit controversial, and don't talk about it now, you can talk about it at lunchtime. When somebody dies, we like to have lots of masses said for them. Why don't you enter into the divine will and have an infinite number of masses said for them? Let me read it again in case you think it's just me. He said, if you lack something, enter into my will and you'll find it. It's there. As many masses as you want. So somebody whom you love has died, you want to get them into heaven fast, enter into the divine will. Isn't that something else? I don't know if you've heard that. If you had, it'll change. It'll change some things for you. As many communions as you want. You can do all the suffrages for that soul. As much love as you want. And you can absolutely bathe this soul in divine love on their journey to heaven. Isn't that fantastic? Nothing is missing in my will. Not only this, but you will find things in a divine and infinite way. It's not limited. When you go into the divine will, nothing is limited. It's on God's dimension. So, April the 8th, 1918. The difference between living united with Jesus and living in the divine will. Now, I couldn't put a VIP big enough on this particular message, because this particular message clarifies a huge misunderstanding in the church. And the huge misunderstanding that people will say is, we've got canonized saints long before your divine will stuff. The church has actually approved of them. People are praying to them. And yet you can only live a spirituality according to the era that you're actually living in. I cannot live a spirituality of 3,000 years. That has not happened, can I? No. I can only live in the time that I am born and reared into. So if these saints have lived in obedience to the divine will, because otherwise if they didn't live in divine will, they live in obedience to the divine will, they wouldn't be saints at all. So if they didn't live in obedience to the divine will, they wouldn't be saints. But if this level of living in the divine will has not been revealed to them, they can't have it. Does that make sense? Yes. If I don't know that apples exist, can I eat them? No. My mind doesn't have a space for the word apple if I've never heard of it. Is that okay? So watch this. This is a big, big answer to a very widespread problem that we have, that people say, should we have it already? You know, like a religious community I've tried to talk to about the divine will said to me, listen woman, we're under vows of obedience. Do you mind? I said, I do, yeah. What level are you at? And they were in a monastery, so, you know, it was big. And we fought it out. It was interesting. I don't know if I won, but never mind. The only thing you have to do is testify. You can't do anything else. So put a big, 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 large VIP on this for me, will you? So, returning to the point about living in the divine will, Luisa was told that it was like living in the state of union with God. Now, as far as I'm concerned, one of the highest expressions of the state of union with God is in the writings of St. John of the Cross. Absolutely incredible, marvellous stuff. Okay. And John says that the highest stage that a human being can reach is union with God. Okay, he's 16th century. He didn't know what was going to be revealed in the 20th century. How could he? So, Jesus said, "My daughter, there is a great difference between living united with me and living in the divine will." Can you look at me just for a second? There are the three levels that I will be talking about in Drummondine. Okay, down here you've got the worldly people. In the middle here you've got Christians trying to reach union with God, and up here you've got divine will. If that upper level was not revealed, the people in the middle cannot reach it. They don't know about it. Okay, he says it's a huge difference. So, living united with me, that's a person in grace trying to reach the fullness of holiness in the middle level. And as he was saying this, he stretched out his arms towards me and he said, "Come into my will even for one instant and you will see the great difference." Okay, so I found myself in Jesus, Luisa said. My little atom, because we're nothing of ourselves, was swimming in the eternal volition. And since this eternal volition is one single act, what the scientists called a singularity. And I'm deliberately using that word because the astrophysicists have made huge progress. And they're saying that none of them believe in the Big Bang anymore. Do you know that? Because they know that somebody had to light the match to get the Big Bang. So they've gone way beyond the Big Bang to what they call a singularity. A single point from which everything emerges, and they are right, they're just not calling it by the right name. Instead of saying singularity, they need to put G, O and one D. Okay, so if I put singularity in here, then I'm telling you that the scientists are almost there in discovering God, having gone through their circuitous route. So the divine will is one single act. Therefore, it contains all acts together, past, present and future. That's why in the divine will you could pray for past, present and future. It's all there. I, being in the eternal volition, took part in that single act which contains all acts as much as it was possible for the creature. This is what we do when we enter into the divine will. I, being in the eternal volition, I took part. Isn't that amazing? Let me put it in a very simple way. That if I live in the divine will, creation, redemption and sanctification has another signature, and it's Francis. It hasn't just got the signature of Jesus. It has a signature with Francis as well. She's entered in. She's participated. She's put her drop of water into his wine. I think that gesture of the Mass is extremely important beyond anything we have grasped. That he wants us to participate in the whole thing. He wants our signature. Make sure you give it to him. It's wonderful. And then it's going to be utterly amazing on the day of general judgment when all the unbelievers see that for creation, redemption and sanctification, there's all these little signatures of human beings that they've all participated. It'll be utterly, utterly amazing for them.
Just in the state of grace.
Luisa said, being in the eternal volition, I took part in that single act which contains all acts as much as it was possible for a creature. So she started out by telling you I'm only an atom. So I'm not the biggest signature on it. Who's the biggest signature on it? It's Jesus. But he does allow us, and the way I kind of look at it for myself is that a mother will take an infant and put the pen in the infant's hand, and the mother will guide the child's hand, and the child will write their name. Now, the child would be able to do it on their own, but the mother will actually guide the child. And that's the way I see that our signatures go onto it. I took part also in acts that do not exist and must yet exist. That's the future. Until the end of centuries, and until God will be God. I love that expression. So that instead of just saying eternity, it's just until God will be God. And for these two, I loved him. I thanked him. I blessed him, etc. There was not one single act that would escape me. That's past, present, or future. And I would take the love of the Father, the love of the Son, and the love of the Holy Spirit, and I would make it my own, just as their will was my own, and I would give it to them as mine. So this is the brilliant part of operating in the divine will, that I take your power, wisdom and love, that's Father, Son and Holy Spirit, I take it to myself so that I can pray to you with all your things. I can pray to you at your level. I can pray to you with yourself. It's incredible. And that means that the prayer is divine. It's not just human. And I will give it to them as mine. How content I was to be able to give them their own love as mine. And how they found their contentment and complete outpouring in receiving from me their own love as mine. Because if a creature can give back to God their own love, the Blessed Trinity, their own love as ours, then we are doing something on behalf of the whole of creation. They are thanked on behalf of the whole of creation. But who can say everything, she said. I lack the words. At this point, Jesus spoke, and he said, have you seen what it is to live in my will? You're going to need this message absolutely, drastically, not just for Drummond but for every day. Have you seen what it is to live in my will? It is to disappear. In other words, we disappear into the will of God. The human into the divine. That's number one. Number two, it is to enter the sphere of eternity. So you go out of time and into eternity. Number three, it is to penetrate into the all-seeingness of the Eternal One, into the uncreated mind, and to take part in everything as much as it is possible for a creature, and in each divine act. It's just mesmerizing. Number four, it is to enjoy the use, even while being on earth, of all the divine qualities. I love you with your own love. Even to be able to say, I love you with your own love, it is totally mind-boggling if you understand what you're doing. Number five, it is to hate evil in a divine way. So this is why every possible shadow of evil or disorder or anything else, it just goes. Nothing unholy or unworthy can enter the presence of God, Hebrews 12:14. Number six, it is extending oneself to everyone without exhaustion. Now, if we were to do that on a physical level, she'd be dead in no time. And here you do it, and it's not costing you anything on the physical level. It's completely on the divine level. But you can reach everyone. Now, one of the signs that you are in fact operating in the divine will is that all your prayers are universal. They're not for me. They're not for one individual out there. They're universal. They're for all people, past, present and future. We can discuss that later. Okay. So it is extending oneself to everyone without exhaustion, because the will that animates this creature is divine. Now, number 7, it is the sanctity that is not yet known. Even in the 21st century, it's not known except to a very few people. It's the sanctity that's not yet known, which I will make known, and I will place the last ornament, the most beautiful, the most refulgent among all the sanctities. It will be the crown and the fulfillment of all other sanctities. So it's an unbelievably immense privilege for us to be able to participate. Now, to live united with me is not to disappear. Two beings can be seen together. And one who does not disappear cannot enter the sphere of eternity. So if you're down on that middle level with the ordinary holiness, there's me and what I'm doing. There's Jesus and what he's doing. One of us doesn't disappear. Like if you take one of our great saints whom I dearly love, and I've always considered her my pin-up girl, St. Therese of Lisieux. On her deathbed she said, I have reached humility of heart. Divine will is much lower than that. I have reached humility of heart, she said on her deathbed. And what the Lord asks of us is, no, you go much further, you go down into nothingness. And when her story broke on the world, I mean, it was an explosion of glory. People couldn't believe that someone would live the way she had lived. And yet what is asked of us in the divine will is actually much greater than that. Okay. So that's why he says, one living united to me. That is the ordinary holiness. There are two beings. One has not disappeared. In the divine will, one disappears into the other. And if one does not disappear, then the human one cannot enter into the sphere of eternity, not until they die. To take part in all the divine acts. Ponder well, and you will see the great difference. That's a terribly important text, because now when people ask you, what is the difference, you have the text. Is that okay? And it answers it so marvellously that it doesn't require any more. So let's look at April the 12th, 1918. The soul must lean within Jesus. Now, in ordinary spirituality, the soul would lean on Jesus from the outside, because there's two. In the divine will, there's only one. So you lean within him. So I think the Lord would say something that I used to hear as a child. And that was, we two are one, but I'm the one. And it used to make me very angry. Because I didn't think my mother should disappear into my father. We two are one, but I'm the one. That is actually true of God. That you and I are one, but he's the one. It's the only time that that statement ever made sense to me. We two are one, but I'm the one. He's the one. It's all about him. It's all about his glory. It's all about worshipping him. It's all about giving him the response that the human race should give. So Luisa said, finding myself in my usual state, I felt an extreme need of Jesus, and leaning myself all within him. Notice the within. You see, it's not outside. This is completely spiritual. Jesus came and he said, my daughter, lean yourself completely within me. You will always find me ready. So I want to give you Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6. My son, lean on the Lord. Lean not on your own understanding. So Proverbs deals with the middle level, but I'll give it to you there as a reference point. Lean yourself completely within me. You will find me always ready. I will never be lacking to you. Even more, the more you lean within me, the more I will pour myself into you. And since many times I feel the need to lean, I will come to you and will lean within you using my own support, which I have formed within you. So I want to give you Psalm 62, verses 3 onwards. By ourselves we're only a tottering wall and a tumbling fence, but when you lean on the Lord, you're leaning on the everlasting life. Okay. Now the Lord says that he forms something within us so that when he wants to lean on us, he can do it. And he said, when I see that you despise the support of creatures, that's why I gave you Proverbs 3, lean not on creatures, and lean not even on yourself, on your own understanding. Lean on God. And he said, I will love you twice as much, and I will double for you my support. So I want to give you Deuteronomy 32:11. The Lord alone is your guide. Deuteronomy 32:11. The Lord alone is your guide. And then he added, when the soul does everything to please me, to love me, and to live at the expense of my will, she comes to be like members of my body. Now, we're supposed to be that anyway, aren't we? So if we're supposed to be that anyway, that's 1 Corinthians 12, from verse 12 to the end of the chapter. Okay. But he's talking about special members, isn't he? So then you would be talking about Romans 8:19, the sons of God that all creation are crying out for, because even the creation itself then will be able to get back into God's order. They will be like members of my own body. And I glory in these members as my own, the legitimate children, as distinct from the adopted children. Otherwise, they would be like members dislocated from me, which give me pain. And not only to me, but to themselves and to their neighbour. Because whatever we have, we give to anybody around us, don't we? These are members which spurt matter, such as to infect and wither the very good that they do. Very good description of the virus. Okay, so I want to give you Matthew 21:40 for that. And I'm going to take a break for a few minutes at this point.